Thank you for joining the Tulsa Christian Businessmen. Presenting Gabe Sherman. The Tulsa Christian Businessmen meet every second Thursday of the month from noon to 1 at the Wyndham Hotel on 41st near Garnett. This video was sponsored by the Tulsa Regional Business Alliance. And now, Gabe Sherman.
You can put him to the side because that's what he does, because he loves the Lord Jesus Christ with all of his heart, and he leads a wonderful team in this district office, and he's blessed to work with, I believe, and yes, I'm biased, many of you know my path with the good congressman. A monkey could have been his campaign manager, and I was blessed to be that monkey during our primary week. But along that path, there were two other men that I need to honor, and that's Joe Kaufman, the Chief of Staff. And now, without further ado, let me introduce him, Gabe Sherman, a man of honor, integrity, and mission focus for the Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Real quickly, do you have Lauren Mason up there in the sponsors?
Yes, he is.
Good. Boy, it's taking a long time on them. I thought you'd forgotten.
There he is. There he is.
Okay, got it.
Rick, you have a thankless job, brother. Except for from the sponsors, they'll be very thankful for the job.
Thank you, Rick.
Good job, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
And I just want you to know, it's such an honor for me to be here. Dr. Gilman, thank you for that. We've been serving together in the trenches now for over 6 years, and I can tell you it's an honor each and every day I get to serve with this man. I do want to introduce two other people on our team. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me back there? Okay, very good. All right. I want to introduce two other gentlemen on our team real quick. One is Philip Jackson. He's a field representative for us. Raise your hand, Philip. All-around good guy. If you get a chance to meet him, please do so. Also, where's Mr. Brian O'Hara? Where are you hiding, Brian? Okay, there he is in the very back. Brian O'Hara is our Deputy District Director, and Brian has the best socks in Tulsa. So if you ever want to know what a good pair of socks looks like, check with Brian O'Hara. So I had the privilege of speaking to this group back in 2016. Was the first time I was able to speak to this particular group. And so whenever I was asked to speak again, I immediately went to Eric Zellner, because I know Eric is intimately involved with this group and has a lot to do with the growth that we've seen in this group. Can I just tell you, God has blessed this group. Man, you guys are growing. And there are a lot of groups here in Tulsa that are not. And you guys are growing, and man, that is something you guys should be proud of. Keep drawing people in, because I believe what happens here is critically important. But I asked Eric, I said, hey, what do you think I should speak about? And he gave me a word. And whenever he said the word, it hit me, and I thought, well, that's something I believe in. It's something I think is important. I could get excited about talking about that. And just the way that God works, I ended up at a funeral that day. I ended up at a funeral at 2 o'clock that afternoon after talking with Eric at about 6:30 in the morning. And whenever I went into the funeral, I started looking at everything that was going on. And I started listening to everything that was said, and the same word just kept coming up over and over and over again. And not only was I hearing this word, it was something that I was experiencing. It was something that I was seeing happen right in front of me. It was something I was able to almost participate in without having been intimately involved with the gentleman that passed away. The gentleman was State Senator Denny Garrison up in Bartlesville. Tremendous guy. Anybody ever driven on the 4-lane highway between here and Bartlesville? Denny Garrison made that happen, right? He's did a lot of tremendous things. That's probably one of the least significant things that he's ever done. But man, I just got to learn more and more about this gentleman. And so I was just so intrigued. And by that point, I was set. I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. And the more that I thought about it, I thought, this is something, not only should we be talking about it, because it's something that all of us should be aware of, but it's also something that we all have in common. It's something that we all share. It's something that we are all doing right now as we're in this room. It's something that we're all participating in whenever we leave this room and whenever we're at home with our families and whenever we're working. This is something that we all share, that we're all building, and that we're all working on. But the problem is, I think that it's been talked about wrong. I think it's been taught incorrectly. And I think it's been defined incorrectly. So I want you to listen to this definition real quick, and then you can tell me what I'm about to talk about. An amount of money or property left to somebody in a will. Amount of money or property left to somebody in a will. What am I talking about?
Legacy.
Inheritance. Mr. Harris said what?
Legacy or bequest.
Legacy. The definition for legacy is what I just told you. That doesn't sound right, does it? Like the way that we think about legacy, an amount of money or property that's left to somebody in a will. And so when I saw that definition, it kind of struck me, because I have a different take on legacy altogether. But I think so much of our world does look at legacy as something that we're leaving behind. And I think part of the problem is we tie legacy to end of life, right? We tie legacy to end of life. One of the things that Dr. Zeller and I have talked about for years is Stephen Covey's principle of end in mind. End in mind. You guys familiar with end in mind? It's a principle of saying, okay, I got to do a thing. Here's what I want that thing to look like when I'm done. I've identified the vision. Well, I know what I want to look, what I want this particular thing to look like when I'm complete. And whenever we have a clear end in mind, we can back up into the actions, right? We can back up into the actions, take the right actions that lead us to that end. And I think what happens with legacy too often, we have the wrong end in mind. We believe legacy is something that we start discussing like 5 years out from when we die. We start pinning legacy to end of life instead of having a much bigger, much bolder end in mind. And so what I think we've got to do, especially as Christian businessmen, is we've got to tackle legacy completely differently. This isn't something where I think too often, like when I went to Denny Garrison's funeral, you learn a lot about a man whenever you go to a funeral, right? And have you ever thought about what's going to be said at your funeral? You ever had that thought? What's going to be said about me whenever I'm gone? What am I going to leave for my family when I'm gone? If we stop there as Christian men, we have completely missed legacy. What's going to be said about me when I'm gone and what I'm going to leave when I'm gone. If we stop there, if that's our end in mind, we have completely missed it. Look, as Christian men, whenever our lives are laid down and examined after we're gone, and if you were to put our life up to somebody that does not know the redeeming power of Jesus Christ, the lives should be starkly different. Agreed?
Yeah.
Agreed? Yes?
Amen.
Can we get an amen?
Amen.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to preach a little bit here. But man, if we're sitting down and we're lining up lives next to each other, the one that knows Jesus Christ intimately should look completely different than the one that does not. But I'm going to tell you, that's not the case. That's not the case. All too often, it's not the case. And I can say that with boldness because of the fruit that's being born here recently whenever you start looking at our Christian faith and you start looking at the generations coming behind. What do we know about the generations coming behind and their walk with Jesus Christ? Is it like the generations before them? No. You can go back to like the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and just move it on up and just watch the generational falling away from the principles of Jesus Christ. So the question is why? Well, I'm telling you, because we aren't doing legacy right. We aren't doing legacy right. And now, I'm not picking on you that are doing legacy right here. Okay? I'm not picking on you. I'm going to tell you, as Christian men as a whole, we are missing it on this point. And you know who suffers? The generations behind. And so if we want to change legacy to make it something that I believe should have an incredible eternal impact when we leave, we've got to start thinking about this thing completely differently. It cannot be something that's tied to end of life and and built up around what we leave for the people behind us. It's got to be focused on eternity. It's got to be grounded in eternity. And so I want to shift the definition of legacy just a little bit here today, and I also want to give you 3 takeaways for how I think we make an eternal impact with our legacy. Anybody in here want an eternal impact with your legacy? Raise your hand. Let me see your hands. Okay, thank you. So we're all on the same page, right? We're all on the same page. So the first thing I think we've got to start doing if we want to have an eternal impact with our legacy is we've got to start seeing legacy differently. We've got to see legacy differently. When I was growing up, seeing was not a strength of mine. You can't tell now because of the wonders of LASIK surgery and contacts, right? But in first grade, we've all went to those checkups where you're a kindergartner, you're in first grade, you're doing the hearing tests and you're doing the vision tests. And so I remember sitting in front of an optometrist and I'm looking into the things, whatever they are, and the camera, 1 better, 2 better, 1 better, 2 better. I'm failing this test because I can't tell a difference any of them. And at one point, the optometrist looks out around and he looks to my mom and says, "Can he read yet?" And my mom's like, "Well, yeah, he's a great reader. I mean, he's one of the top readers in his class. He reads really well." He's like, "Can you have him read this book to me?" And so I get the book and I'm like, and I start reading the book, right? And so at that point, I got a good pair of glasses and they were about this thick, right? And when you're a first grader and you've got glasses that are this thick and you walk into first grade late because you've been at the optometrist, and your best friend is in there, and he looks up and he sees you, and he stands up and points and starts laughing. You think, my life is over, right? My life is officially over. It just ended today. So I played a lot of sports growing up. So my glasses were getting knocked off all the time and getting destroyed. So I got blessed beyond measure with these wonderful things called rec specs, right? Which, anybody remember Horace Grant playing basketball? Mine were not like Horace Grant's. They were not that cool, right? Something was wrong, I think, with the way my head was shaped, and the rec specs wouldn't stay up. And so my mom, in her infinite wisdom, oh man, this brings back so many memories. You remember croquis that you put on the back of your glasses?
Yeah.
So my mom had this brilliant idea. She's like, well, I'll just cut off the ends of a croquis, and I'll sew it across there, and I'll create headgear for my kid, right? And so I was the kid with headgear that was trying to keep his glasses on running around. And so I was scarred for life, right? Just I wanted no part of glasses. Boy, as soon as I could have surgery and as soon as I could get contacts, I would get them. But my parents were willing to put me through what I thought was embarrassment of huge glasses and rec specs and everything else. Why? Because they knew I needed to see, right? They knew I needed to see, and they knew that academically it would benefit me, that athletically it would benefit me, that physically it would benefit me if I had the best sight possible, right? Can I tell you something? Jesus Christ wants you to see legacy differently. He wants you to see it differently. He doesn't want legacy to be about what you leave and when you die. I'm going to redefine the legacy for you real quick, and then I'll tell you how I got this definition. Your legacy is the eternal impact of your walk with Jesus Christ. That's it. Your legacy is the eternal impact of your walk with Jesus Christ. Nothing else matters inside of your legacy. Some of you are fantastic businessmen. Okay, some of you are, and I know because I've spent time with you, some of you are doing tremendously well. Some of you are in the middle of career transition. We've got a lot of different stages of life in here. We've got a lot of different accomplishments in here. And if we get focused on all of the earthly, temporary things whenever it comes to legacy, we're going to miss the point. We're going to miss the point of all of it. Because if we're focused on the earthly and the temporary, if that's our perspective for legacy, then that's what drives our decisions, right? That's what drives our decisions. And that's what drives our legacy, is all of the earthly, temporary stuff. But when we get focused on eternity, when we get focused on walking with Jesus Christ, when we get focused on all that that relationship means and all that it opens us up to, man, we're making decisions with an eternal perspective. We're taking action with eternity in mind, and our legacy benefits from it. And here's what's cool about it. If you're making a decision with eternity in mind, the temporary, the earthly, the worldly stuff benefits. Would you agree? If I'm making decisions with Jesus Christ in mind about my relationships, about my marriage, about my job, about my employees, about my political affiliation, about all of those things, if I'm making decisions with eternity in mind, everything on earth benefits. But you cannot flip the two. You can't flip the two. You cannot make all of your decisions based on earthly things and then just kind of do a little Jesus and watch eternity benefit. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. So we have got to get focused. We've got to start seeing legacy through the eyes of Jesus Christ, right? That's what we've got to start doing. And if we're seeing legacy through the eyes of Jesus Christ, then we're making eternal decisions. We're trying to have an eternal impact. And as in Matthew it says, do not lay up your treasures here on earth where moth and rust will destroy and where thieves will break in and steal. But lay up your treasures in heaven where moth and rust cannot destroy and thieves cannot steal. Because where your heart is, there your treasure will be also, right? And that's what we've got to be focused on whenever it comes to legacy. Eternity first. Start seeing legacy differently. Okay? That's the first point. Start seeing legacy differently. Secondly, is we've got to start owning our legacy. We've got to start owning our legacy prior to 3 years before we die. Prior to 5 years before we die. We've got to start taking ownership of this thing. One thing that you know about ownership is that when you're a business owner, there's another level of responsibility. Agreed? There's another level of responsibility. There's another level of accountability whenever you are the business owner. There's another level of commitment to a desired outcome when you're a business owner. And it's different because you're the owner, right? Sometimes your employees, they don't have the same commitment as you do. Why? Because they're not the owner, right? Because they're not the owner. The things that bother you might not bother them. And how many of you guys that own businesses would love to have employees that took ownership of the company as well? Would you love to have that? Yes. Yes, you would love to have that. Why? Because you know if they take a viewpoint or a standpoint of ownership, man, they are going to be making decisions in the best interest of that business. And that'd be a wonderful thing to have. I've been blessed to work with people that own the mission we're on with Jim Bridenstine. They own it. Brian O'Hara, he spends, I can't even tell you how many hours a year he spends representing Congressman Bridenstine in the field. I can tell you a rough number of events in 5 years. It's right around 10,000. How How many of you guys been to 10,000 events in the last 5 years? Brian O'Hara has. Philip Jackson started just over a year ago. Hit 1,000 events in his first year. Why? Is he trying to just promote Philip Jackson? No. He's going out there and he's representing Congressman Jim Bridenstine everywhere that he goes. He has owned the mission. And because he owns it, there's another level of responsibility and accountability. Now, he could say, oh, I'm a field rep, and going out and talking about casework, that's not my job. That's not my job. You ever been around an employee that says, that's not my job? Well, sales aren't happening, but I'm making a crap out of these widgets. But sales isn't happening. It's not my job to go sell, it's my job to make widgets. Or the sales team saying, you know what, I don't have enough widgets to sell. But it's not my job to make widgets, it's my job to sell. That's not my job. What happens in our legacy a lot of time is we take the employee mentality. Here's what that sounds like. Well, I don't disciple my kids because I take them to church. That's their job. That's their job. I don't need to disciple them. And you don't say it out loud, you just don't do it. Right? You just don't do it. It's not on me to set the tone at the household for my family. For me to be the one that kind of pushes intimacy forward with my wife. For me to be the one that creates a safe environment at home. That's not my job, that's my wife's job. She stays at home. It's not my job. Guys, guess what? There's a little principle out there called extreme ownership. If you've ever read the book, Extreme Ownership, it's written by 2 Navy SEALs. And the whole premise of the book is that leaders understand that they own everything in their world. They own it. There's nobody else. It's the leader's job. And men, I'm speaking to you. You own it. You own it. Not in some chauvinistic, macho way, but you own it. And man, if you are owning your legacy now, then you aren't panicking 3 years before you die. You aren't panicking in those years because you're taking ownership now and you're making ownership decisions about your legacy. So what does that look like? Well, I'll probably make a different decision, a decision that would have me investing in my kids as opposed to spending 80 hours at work away from them. Why? Because I own the success of my kiddos right now. You know, I'll probably set aside time for my wife and make sure she feels special and I get to take her out on Valentine's Day. Guys, write that down, make it happen, right? Because you own the tone for your marriage. You own that tone for your marriage. You don't let somebody else try and set that tone and you aren't depending on your wife to manage it. You're stepping in and you're owning that tone. Whenever we take ownership of our legacy as Christian men, that puts us on an eternal trajectory. It's on an eternal trajectory. That makes us men that are going to make decisions with Jesus Christ at the forefront of everything. We put Him in the middle, and man, we start making decisions that glorify Him. And if we own that relationship with Jesus Christ, we put that at the center of everything that we're doing, I promise you, you're going to make better decisions for everybody else that counts on you. And you're going to own the responsibility of legacy a whole lot sooner instead of waiting on down the road. Last thing I'm going to give you here. So S was see legacy differently. O was own your legacy, right? W is walk that thing out. Walk your legacy out. The only way that we walk our legacy out is if we, again, start with the end in mind. We start understanding what that legacy is, and we're able to put nice action steps. We're able to identify the things that bring me closer to that goal or further away from it. And then we got to start taking action. We're going to talk today. A lot of you guys are going to agree with me today. We're going to feel pretty good whenever we leave here. And then you're going to go rub up against the world. Okay? You're going to go rub up against the world. You're going to look at your cell phone. Because most of you haven't been while I've been talking, which I appreciate. But you're going to get out of here and you're going to have 27 text messages sitting there. And one of those text messages is going to test what I just talked about right now. Are you going to look at it from an eternal perspective in the way that you respond? Or are you going to fire off in the flesh, man? Amen. Right? You're going to start looking at that. You're going to rub up against this right now. So the question is, how quickly can you get from, well, legacy is just something that I do and I leave for somebody, to everything that I do, from the smallest decision I make each day, impacts the eternal legacy I have on this earth and beyond. So we've got to start walking this thing out differently. And it starts with you. It starts today, right? We're going to walk things out a little bit differently than maybe when we came in this room. And so I've told you a new definition of legacy today, right? That your legacy is the eternal impact of your walk with Jesus Christ. That's what it is. I've given you 3 tips here, right? To see it differently, to own it, and to walk it out. And my friend Eric Zellner, my mentor Eric Zellner, he speaks in acrostics. That's what he does. He's taught that to me. The first one he ever taught me was forward. That's how we won the campaign. Favor, wisdom, direction. That was the first one he ever taught me. And that was our plan for winning a campaign with Jim Bridenstine. Favor, wisdom, and direction. Those were the 3 things we needed. So I just gave you see, own, and walk. Sow, right? Sow. Here's the deal. If you sow eternally, you reap eternally.
Amen.
Okay? If you sow eternally, you reap eternally. Galatians 6 is very clear. Be not deceived. God will not be mocked. That what a man sows, he will also reap. Right? I believe that. I totally believe that. So here's what I want for my legacy. I start talking about end in mind. You know what I want? I want people in heaven right now knowing about Gabe Sherman. Like, that's what I want. Like, when you go by this, it says in the Bible, Jesus went to prepare a place for me, right? If you're driving down the streets of gold looking at my place, like, I want a U-Haul truck stopping like twice a day, dropping off crowns and rewards, right? I want that happening. I want people walking down the streets of gold looking at that, and there's like a clock, like the national debt clock, that's just spinning, because Gabe is doing great things on earth, right? That are making an eternal impact. And I want to be known before I get there. And then once I get there, I want it to be like the best multi-level marketing scheme you ever saw, right? I want to be sitting there in heaven, and I want to have equipped people on earth and sown in people here on earth to where their work are producing rewards for me in heaven, and my work is still going, right? So I've started with an eternal end in mind, and man, someday I want to see that come to be. But I'm telling you guys, if we stay focused on this legacy thing from a temporary, earthly, worldly thing, you know what we're going to continue to see? Generational falling away. That's what you're going to see. Generational falling away. There is no excuse for our legacies to be so weak that they don't impact anybody for eternity, but they leave a ton of money for somebody. That just isn't, we just can't settle for that anymore. I want you to take care of your families. I want you to bless them when they're gone. I want them to have great stories. But I also want them to celebrate in heaven with you someday. And I want people that are here, that are yet to join you, to be spreading the gospel because of the life you lived. Right? That's what we should be about. So I hope that today you've been challenged just a little bit. Right? I hope that maybe you'll think about legacy just a little bit differently when you leave. And I hope you'll start making small decisions each day that'll bring you closer to making an eternal impact that, man, just rocks people's world when you're here. Okay? Sound fair enough?
Amen.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for the time.
Him, honor, integrity, mission focus. Bless you. Hey, we're going to start a tradition. We're going to do it with Gabe. And we had a great board meeting this morning. Where's our other board member? Dan, where are you hiding? Dan, would you stand up? Our 3-person boards, our president, Ted Roberts, myself, and Dan Skurbitz is the board of the Tulsa Christian Businessmen. And we met this morning, had a great board meeting, Mr. President. God is good. We have a great legacy in place to continue what Ted Roberts and this many team members, Peter and the rest of the men that are here that started this, and we're going to continue a legacy, and it's fitting that you spoke, and Gabe told me prior to this speech what he was going to speak about. So Gabe, on behalf of Tulsa Christian Businessmen, we would like to give you this, and my power verse is Ephesians 6:10 through 20. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principles, against spiritual wickedness in high places, which is everywhere. It's not against flesh and blood. It's against that garbage, that crud, that evil one that we call the yucky one. But he doesn't win. We know how the book ends.
Amen.
We know how the book ends, don't we? So let's talk in victory. So this is Gabe Sherman. Gabe Sherman, District Director for Congressman Jim Bridenstine, has taken up the shield of faith, which you shall be able to extinguish all the arrows. Take the salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which you can extinguish the evil one, and the helmet, which is the Word of God, brother. And then I'll tell you, legacy is what's on the back of this. It says, Gabe, be bold for Jesus, Ephesians 6:10 through 20, and it's given to you by Tulsa Christian Businessmen. Thank you.